OBSBOT have sent through their Tiny 2 Lite webcam for us to test out. On paper, the specs look very good, but how does this compare to testing it in a real life setting? We've tested it in different lighting scenarios and played with the software. In a dark room with just the glow from our monitor and we can be seen. Do expect a lot of pixelation due to the lack of light, but if you need to make a quick call in the middle of the night, then this will be good enough. With natural light coming in through the window and a lot of that grain and pixelation has disappeared. If your light is coming in from the one side like it does with us, then do expect the auto exposure to struggle with the one side being overexposed. Movement does look as though we are getting the full 30 frames per second in the 4K mode, and if you are an OBS user, then you can go into the settings, untick the exposure box and play around with the slider, and whilst this isn't perfect at removing the overexposed part on our face, it does bring an improvement. Using just our room light and we get a good image from this. It's obvious where the light is positioned in the room, judging by it bouncing off my bald head. When we come a little closer to the lens and it refocuses, then you can get a subtle blur in the background. The movement is still around the 30 frames per second, using just the light in the room, so this is perfect for video calls. Using a couple of ring lights in front of us, and when we first get in front of the camera, then do expect it to be overexposed whilst the auto exposure kicks in. This will take a few seconds, but we do get an amazingly good image. The colours are looking how they should, and we still get that subtle blur in the background. Movement is still hitting the 30 frames per second, and you can swap from 4K to 1080p, and this will up that frame rate to 60 frames per second. So if you have a lot of movement going on in a live stream, for example, and you need those extra frames, then this is going to do the job very well. Switching on our coloured backlights, and we didn't experience any issues with this. The auto exposure does a great job, and we're not overexposed at all. We are looking crisp, which is what you want from any webcam, so you really shouldn't have an issue with this. Focusing on a small object works rapidly, and it looks great. When we move it away, it takes a second or so for it to recalibrate itself to bring the background back into focus, and when we bring the object back, then it refocuses very quickly. It works fine when you move the object away from the lens and back towards it, and you can get up to a couple of inches away before there's any kind of struggle with the focus. If you want to remove a green screen in software like OBS, then once again, it works very well. We initially experienced some spill from our green screen, but this is due to our green screen being right next to us. You can play around with the sliders in OBS, and this will allow you to get a much better key, or you can just move your green screen a little further away. Holding your hand up in a high five position will enable tracking, and I've got to say, this performed extremely well. It keeps up with us even if we are moving around quickly, but it is possible to move so quick that it loses you, but you do need to be going at quite a pace for this to happen. We walked out of the room to see if it would continue tracking us when we came back in, and it did with no issues at all. Options are available where we can track our upper body, which closes up that field of view and also follows you wherever you go. But if you need to get even closer than that, then there is a close-up option which zooms further onto your face. Holding your hand in the L shape will enable zooming. Now this will zoom in and out, but you don't have any control when you want the zoom to stop. There is a zoom factor slider which allows you to select an endpoint for the zoom, so this will enable it to zoom all the way out and back into where you set this zoom point. If you do want a little more control over the zooming, then you can do an L shape on both hands, and you move these away and towards each other to control the zoom, which saves you having to select that endpoint in the software. If you want a live stream on a vertical platform like TikTok, then it is possible by turning it on its side and it will automatically change the orientation. You will want this mounted onto a tripod of some sort, which allows you to get the camera into position rather than holding it on its side. You can set preset positions which allow you to set points in a room which you want it to focus on, and at the click of a button you can switch to each of these. You are limited to 3 safe positions, and we didn't experience any issues when switching from one to the other. There are additional options in here too where we can set instructions when we move to a save point. So for example, if I move from looking at something behind me and then back to me, then I can set it to automatically start tracking. So OBSBOT have really gone in depth with this feature. We have multiple controls inside the software for the microphone where we can leave it active when the webcam itself goes to sleep. We have options for reducing any background noise you may have. This is a microphone test with the noise reduction completely turned off. This is the audio you can expect. This is what it's going to sound like when the noise reduction is set on the weak setting. And this is what it sounds like on the medium noise reduction. And this is on full blast. This is strong. So this is what it sounds like with the strong noise reduction setting. And we can boost the gain if it is struggling to hear you. Automatic gain control is enabled, which means that if we move away from the webcam, it should automatically boost those volume levels. So hopefully when we get ourselves a distance away like this, then you should still be able to hear us, but the closer we get to that webcam, the better the audio should sound. We can completely turn that microphone off, and we do have a radio distance option where the microphone will detect you even if you are further away. This is with the close setting, so the further that we get away, you shouldn't be able to hear us quite as well. Moving away from the camera using the standard setting, so hopefully you can hear us a little more loudly compared to our previous setting. The radio distance is now on 4, so this is the best setting we have if you need to speak from a distance away from the webcam. And this is the audio you can expect. The autofocus can be disabled or configured yourself if you prefer, and we get an option where we can toggle between global and face focus. The global will put in focus whatever is nearest to the lens, and switching to the face mode will bring your face into focus regardless of the object being closer. Exposure can be fine-tuned if you prefer to manually configure this. I couldn't see too much difference when toggling between the global and face mode when trying to eliminate the white spot on my head. The compensation bar underneath, on the other hand, sorted this out immediately. White balance can be manually configured too if needed, but I found that the auto settings perform great for me, and you also get the usual options like configuring the contrast, saturation, sharpness and hue. If your background is not blurry enough, then we can increase this in the software. Do bear in mind though, the higher you move the slider, the more unnatural it's going to look. If too much of your background is on display, then we can toggle from the wide view to either medium or narrow to close this up. You can manually zoom in to close things up too, but do expect a loss in quality the further you zoom in. The Retouch Beauty mode is a nice unusual feature where we can change the way we look by using either one of the preset options or manually moving the sliders to really fine tune how you want to look on camera, and we do get some pretty wild results. Additional scene presets are available under here too to change the overall look of the image. Any changes you make in here can be brought over to other software like Zoom by clicking the virtual camera option and selecting the OBSBOT virtual option when selecting your camera. When the filters are used, then it does use a little more CPU power compared to when the retouch option is disabled. When you close any software which is using the webcam, the head will face downwards to eliminate the need of a privacy cover, and there's 3 different sleep time options available.